Money printing is very much like an addict dealing with an addictive substance. Economic stimulus is what it's typically called. Let's talk about these parallels.
If you become your own Federal Reserve and just can't not stop pressing the button, now we call this a problem.
So how do we think about drawing that line between habituation and addiction?
Immediate feedback loop of addiction is just immediate gratification. The price that you pay for it is always in the future.
Reaping before sowing.
If you're open to receiving help, you get what you need in the way you need it.
If you knock, the door shall be opened.
And people can make this fact like morality only exists when the conditions are good enough.
The measure of a man is what he does with power or how he responds to adversity.
Alcohol is not that person's problem. If it was, they're not an alcoholic. The alcohol is the solution to their problem. That person will drink again. This person needs to die and become another person. It's a transformation.
You sort of think you're making progress sometimes, but then you get so flipped upside down and humbled again. I don't know. You just smile and keep going. I mean, I guess it's probably, I don't think we or I are the originators of this idea that money printing is very much like an addict dealing with an addictive substance, right? It's even the term stimulus is used, right? Economic stimulus is what it's typically called. So there's even that kind of verbiage built into the words that central bankers are using when they print money to stimulate the economy. And so obviously you work with people that are dealing with addiction. Let's talk about these parallels. Like, I think it's a bit more than a metaphor. It seems like there's something structural that's going on. Like maybe the way the organism gets really dependent on certain substances and then starts lying to himself to justify consumption of those substances sort of reflects what's going on in a centrally banked society where it starts making things up like Keynesian economics to justify the continued monopolization and printing of money. So can we like jump into this? It sounds like it might be a tenuous connection, but I think there's a lot of parallels that will make it make sense.
Yeah, I think it's almost hard to approach just because from different levels of perspective or different resolutions, that analogy is true, like on for a lot of reasons. But a lot of people intuitively, it's like, what's the correlation between addiction and we'll just call it money printing, but any abstraction of a money instrument past the true value that it's indicating. You can think of like fractional reserve banking. I actually like to start with just a recap of or a quick analysis of when you fractionalize the notes that represent underlying assets. One is a lie. Yeah. Right. They both can't be true.
That's right.
They both can't call on the same thing. So I think the analogy, that's when it starts. It's not money itself, which is representation of value. It's when that abstraction happens and it's not reflective of reality. That's what makes it untrue.
Fundamentally, it is a misrepresentation, right? So you have classic example, gold in the vault, and then paper certificates that represent those gold deposits, right? As long as that relationship remains 1-to-1, right? So for every note that says 1 ounce of gold or whatever the unit is, there's actually 1 ounce of gold in the vault. That's a full reserve bank, right? But once you start to issue more paper than there is in gold to back it up, then you are running a fractional reserve, which means you're fundamentally defrauding the customers that are using those notes.
Right.
And so that's what we call fractional reserve banking. There's other technical terms here that economists use. They'll call money certificates. So like if there's a 1 ounce note in circulation and there's 1 ounce of gold in the bank, then that's a money certificate. But once you overissue the paper, they call that overissuance fiduciary media. we've been reading Principles of Economics, which is Saifedean's book. And
so I was just thinking
there is, Mises is the guy that did all this work basically in his book, Theory of Money and Credit. But so there's more technical language here,
right?
But we're going to stick with money printing.
We're just calling it
it's
that,
basically
right?
that excess, right? Like anytime you're running the fractional reserve, whatever that excess of paper over the underlying is the misrepresentation. It's the lie. It's the fraud,
right?
Whatever you want to call it. And then on a fiat currency standard, you have zero reserve.
Right.
So it's the whole thing is a lie.
Right. The ceiling just comes off of how far you can abstract away from the actual underlying value.
Yes. You're disregarding reality 100% at that point.
Exactly. Full delusion.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, but, and the reason it's like I'd start there is because it's kind of where I see the correlation between addiction and money printing. But as you said, there are all sorts of monetary instruments. It's the same thing, but rehypothecation, quantitative easing, all these. But and I think about this. I think about you a lot sometimes because it's a very useful, whether you originated it or whatever, when you say mechanically it's the same thing as theft. It's a very useful linguistic tool or a way to approach and talk about this. So you can get rid of the intent of who did it, why they're doing it, whatever. And mechanically, this is the same thing as theft, or it's just so when you look at the mechanics of things and you could disregard the intent, it's just very useful because it's inclusive for people. So it's a useful tool to transfer this message. And so I'll try to use the same like language, like making this comparison, but the comparison is in an individual body addicted to chemicals, and or addiction, can be, at the end of the day, I think it's chemicals, because whether it's gambling or whatever, you're chasing dopaminergic processes. And I'll note, because it was important for me to kind of, what addiction is kind of hijacking is that process. It's a chemical process that we have. Jordan Peterson maps this out very well in the way of setting an aim, and as you head towards it, the purpose of your dopaminergic system is to reward you along this way. Right. And
when you're moving closer to the goal, you get positive emotion.
And it's not about being there or getting there. It is, things are more salient, and your experience feels depth when you're in the process of doing it.
Yes.
Right. And if things feel more real, it feels worth living. There's all sorts of ways that people describe it, but that's
the peak of that is the flow state, right?
Right. Like when you're in it, and it's not about being at the place you're trying to go or getting the aim. Right. When you feel flow state, when you feel like you're at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. Yeah. And what comes along with it is the physiological feeling of meaning and purpose and all these things. So chemicals and or pseudo things can hijack that. And I think this is the big difference, and you'll like this because we talk about things like things that correlate to this all the time. But low time preference is kind of this deciding factor in. I think about the saying, anything worth having, or something like. And it's not even, maybe not a saying, but it's just the thought that if to the extent that it's hard to get, or the time that you get is pushed off, is to the extent that it's worth, right? Or valuable. Like the proportion of how hard something is to the proportion of the reward. And so you can think of just an immediate feedback loop of addiction is just immediate gratification. That really, and the price that you pay for it is always in the future. So it's the inverse of saving or sustainable systems or anything like that. It's the complete opposite of it. So
the opposite of deferred gratification, which is if you're deferring the gratification, saving or investing, you get a larger reward in the future.
Right.
But if you flip that, you get the reward now, but you get diminished experience in the future. Right.
Immediate returns.
Yes.
So people
Huberman's called this like cheap dopamine is the devil. It's kind of his summation of that. Like if it's cocaine or it's porn or it's something that you like, there's no effort, right? You just do the thing and you get this dopamine hit, then that's going to lead you down the wrong path. Whereas if it's exercise, if it's actual goal setting and moving towards it, all of these things that require work, proof of work,
right,
that tends to be the proper use of that reward pathway mechanism.
And that's where I would naturally go with it. Yeah. It's this is why that abstraction from the underlying, why one's a lie. The real problem is because there was no energy tethering that note to reality. Yes. And this is, and to even be able to talk about this, say, in the way I think about it now, only because Bitcoin exists, really, is I have the words to see like what was missing. And it's the proof of work is the thing that's missing. To half of every transaction, right? There's no energy required to make that note, which is resembling the value. And this is a serious problem, and it's not intuitively, people don't know this, but in delving into the question, what is money? This is this is one of the main things you come to. It's a lie immediately when it comes into existence with nearly no effort.
Yes.
And that's, that's the genesis of the issue. And then everything downstream from that are just ramifications that were already set in motion and can't not happen now.
Yeah.
Just like, just an addiction. And I know we're talking about money, but in my mind, at least, it's the parallel to the process in an individual body and mind. Taking drugs is the exact same, problem in all these ways, that when I'm uncomfortable or I'm, irritated, not at ease, and I seek ease and comfort, right? I just came home from work and I'm, got to kick the boots up, and I'd rather feel some other way than I am. And I can immediately change that. Usually and again, I'm not broadcasting. It's like, I'm not a zealot, like zero substances. You should never really seek relief. It's not that. It's seemingly addicts or people who, there's, and we'll probably get into it later, but there's it's not, you shouldn't do it ever. But if you ever have a problem regulating this, right? If you become your own Federal Reserve and just can't not stop pressing the button, it's like now we call this a problem.
Yeah.
And that's not everybody, but that is a thing that happens.
Yeah.
So,
this is actually I think this is a philosophical problem in almost every single domain. It's like, where do you draw the line? Right? Where does
balance?
Yeah, where does, I don't know, let's pick something that's video games, right? Like, presumably if you just play them a certain amount, it's not that bad. I mean, of course, all of this is disputable. I guess I should pick something even less like food, right? You can be addicted to food, right? You can overeat. So like, where do you draw the line between eating and food addiction? Like, where is it? People will often say it's like, oh, when it starts creating bad situations in your life. Like, I don't know, you're missing your kid's baseball game because you want to eat some tacos. I don't know. Right. So how do we think about drawing that line between, let's say, habituation and addiction?
Yeah. Systemically, maybe we can, but and what I mean by that is like a network or a system that is a combination of other people, because that can be addicted. We're talking about money printing, everything on an individual level. I think it's for each person, person, right? And I would say maybe other people from outside could measure and be like, oh, that's too much for that guy, But I would just say the only relevant thing and is that person is subjectively identifies that it's too much, or it's really too much is even a weird way to put it. It depends what you want, and it depends on your aims, and it depends what you value. Yeah. So if you value time with your kids or your family, or you want a holistic, sensible family unit. There's like me time in there. You're not always prioritizing time with your kids per se, but it's to find this, I don't like the word holistic usually, but in this, I think it because I'm trying to avoid saying balance, because this is just, I don't know, a rabbit hole for me, balance. But
or you're trying to consider all of the priorities you have in life, maybe, and like
right.
if you're prioritizing this thing that you're addicted to too much, or not, the thing that you may be addicted to, you're trying to figure out. It's like, how is it disruptive to your priority stack? Something like that.
Yeah. And yes. And then, because now I'm thinking of John Vervaeke, and because your priorities, they're constantly being fleshed out. Like what matters to you, or what means something to you even, is it happens not just in your cognition. It's the interplay between environment and you. And normally these are like seen separately, and like the environment is happening to you, but it's that doesn't seem to be true. It's consciousness itself, seemingly. I don't know how I'm talking about consciousness already, but what is money rabbit hole? But it's not always even what you want. You know, Jordan Peterson talks about this. There's like consciousness and then calling. And these, he uses that. He's talking about different faces or ways to describe the ineffable.
Yeah.
You know, in the story, in the Bible, like God comes through in certain different ways. One is a calling, you know, and one is a consciousness, the Jiminy Cricket, and the one who knows he's lying. You know, I can lie and I can watch myself lie. Who's this conscious observer? And it's, so what matters to me, or what direction or what aim I should have, isn't even purely my conscious like preferences or wants. It's, I have to be listening to and attuned with and adaptive to my environment and this thing that's cognition or consciousness. And I don't know, I was thinking of John Vervaeke, because this requires a humble, honest inquiry into oneself, and not an assumption of like what I want, what I need. It's if you seemingly do, actually, we really should probably like save that, because talking about reciprocal narrowing and opening, I think we can draw more correlations between money printing, you know, and addiction. But I think that it's pretty easy to see that getting awardances before you have earned them, you know, you consuming your corn before you grew it. It really is. That's what money printing is. Yeah. It's
reaping before sowing.
Right. Reaping before sowing.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, how is that destructive? And I would almost say,
well, because you're eating the seed corn that you could plant for next season.
Right. Yeah. And I think about it like lying, like an addict lying. Yes. It is distorting reality.
Yes.
That's really what you're doing. And because the thing is we talked about this the other week, but you can lie and get away with it in the sense that no one finds out. Yeah. Right. You can tell a lie and die before anyone, and they never knew the difference. And the question is, does anyone ever really get away with anything? And I, you know, not just thinking, via my experience, it's like no one gets away with anything. That's what I found out. And the same with money printing, the same with any lie, the same with any distortion of reality. It always snaps back.
Yes.
You can't beat it.
In Bitcoin, we often dream about the idea of forming citadels, which are independent, self-sovereign communities that have their own energy, food, and water resources. Today, that dream is becoming a reality at the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a 705-acre regenerative agriculture community located at the Florida-Georgia line near Folkston, Georgia. The farm is known as the healthiest place on earth, and it includes orchards, organic standing gardens, regenerative animal pastures, berry fields, and much, much more. Today, the farm features 25 custom-built cabins and has plans to construct 225 more in the years ahead. The farm has its own food, energy, and water sources and is completely off-grid. So if you're looking to join a Citadel community comprised of sovereign individuals, then go to okefenokee.com okefarm.com today to learn more about membership. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on custom cabin pricing. Again, that's okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. I've used this kind of Bitcoin terminology before, but like you're forking reality in a way, right? You're creating a representation of reality that does not map to actual reality. And the other interesting thing about lying that's contra investing is that you create this deviation, this fork, right? So there's the main chain of reality, right, and your shitcoin lying narrative version of it. As they continue to deviate and more people ask questions about what really happened, you have to layer on more lies to keep the charade going, right? So the deviation keeps getting wider and wider.
Right.
And at some point, the three things cannot remain long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth, right? The truth eventually emerges. And the further that deviation has been, the more severe the snapback, right, or the reconciliation. And Peterson talks a lot about his clinical psychology clients, like the people that are the most screwed up. It's like there's these long chains of intergenerational lies and deception. And it's like people are just so forked into oblivion, where it may not even be. In the Bible, they talk about the sins visiting, the son 7 generations hence, right? So the father could sin, and then those sins could have repercussions on multiple generations of his lineage. And so it seems like there is some real...
Yeah, well, we could just map the biblical story of that right over it's like hyperinflated currency. Mm-hmm. Someone not born yet, right, is going to pay that debt that we are pushing off into the future, right? And they did not do it, and they didn't even... Like even Jeff Booth standards, even if like I'm against it, I'm on a Bitcoin podcast talking about it, and I go and I'm a participant and almost an enforcer of that same system. Yeah. Right. It's like, but this kid, he never even did that. Of right. Course. Truly undeserving. Yeah. And he's the one who pays the bill. Yeah. Right. And it's and
so this emphasizes our interconnectedness. Like as much as we like, and it is important to understand that it's individuals that act. But we're also, to use Rene Girard's term, we're interdividual, right? Like we're always imitating one another. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. We're all products of our environment. Like we could say it a lot of different ways, but we're impressionable and we impress upon one another. And it's true more so when we're young, typically, like generally speaking, right? The young tend to be more impressionable than the old. And then, certain people that might have competence in certain domains impress upon people more than others, but it's happening all the time. Our personalities are basically a collection of all the personalities we've interacted with across time. And so I want to ask because what's tricky here is like the way you're saying it is like, okay, the addict, the person, let's say the person, because they might not be an addict, right? So they're trying to figure out, am I addicted to food or not? Am I addicted to video games or not? The person that may or may not be addicted to something, the way you were framing that sounded to me kind of like it's kind of up to them and what they want and their own priorities. But then there's this other side of the equation where I can think of someone that could be, you know, very addicted to a serious substance, you know, heroin or something like that, to the point where their family and friends have an intervention with them.
Right.
And they're like, hey, you know,
what's the matter here?
You got to stop doing it. Yes. And then maybe, and the addict sometimes is like, no, like it's completely fine. I
Not
want
only
heroin.
sometimes, most of the time.
Okay. So it's like, there's this element of very deep self-deception involved with addiction.
Yeah. So what I was saying, and just to be clear, because I do agree with you all the way. And I was just, I said what I think is important, right? Or the only thing that matters maybe. And I know people are being affected and, you know, there's all sorts of catastrophe that surrounds anyone addicted, you know, to any great degree. I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm just saying as far as erring towards a solution or this reconciliation, finally them get that collapse so they can get free of this departure of truth and their delusion, is the only thing that matters to that end is them subjectively. And it's not like they didn't know it, bringing it, it's, you know, your favorite quote, bringing the conscious or bringing the unconscious conscious finally, and really, and then reconcile with themselves, noticing that they are prioritizing this thing over things they wish were above it. It's like, you know, a lot of, you know, they'll sacrifice a sport that they fell in love with. Yeah. You know, relationships and everything downstream, and it gets worse and worse, and things that mean most to you or further out on that time scale. Do you know, or, that linear path of addiction, which there's only one path, and it's destruction.
That's where the deception is also very pernicious, because even what you said, they're like the things that they may think are most important to them, but their actions say otherwise. Right. Right. It's like my closest relationship to addiction is my mother, my late mother, passed away last year, who was an alcoholic for 20 years. And her thing was always, she would tell me, I can quit drinking whenever I want. You know, this woman was drinking a lot every day. It was definitely impacting her life, her relationships, like in a lot of terrible ways. But in her mind, she wasn't an alcoholic because she could quit whenever she wanted. And as it turns out, she was actually right, because eventually she just quit, like out of the blue, completely quit. And she was sober for the last few years of her life. But there was like this impossible situation to reason with her, because you couldn't, even in her sober moments, you couldn't talk to her about her alcoholism, because she would just meet you with that answer. And so it was like, she was actually putting alcohol consumption higher in the priority stack than the relationships and kids and all the things that it was damaging. Now, it's not to say she's doing that all the time, right? Like, she still did good things for us and whatnot, but like the fact that it was even the priority stack could change like that is a problem, right? If you're a parent, you're putting something above your kids, that's probably a problem. Right. How do you, so like, it's not enough even to just be concerned about the things that you want. There's also this social appraisal element where you might think, oh no, I'm not an addict because I can quit whenever I want, or whatever story you're telling yourself.
Right. There we could.
But people on the outside are like, definitely not true. Like, we're seeing this from a totally different angle, and this is a giant blind spot for you. Right. It's like, how do you reconcile those perspectives and determine whether someone is an addict or not?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. And really, because is the question, how do I get them to see, you know, that their priorities are messed up? Yeah. And this is akin to like the word belief, you know, or faith or something. It's not what you even want to believe or think you believe. I really think it's fleshed out in what your feet do. Yeah. You know, it's you try to act in accordance with it, and act being the most important thing, other than how you feel about yourself or your image of yourself or who you think you are. And then, so I'll just, I don't know how to, first of all, I don't know what people's priorities actually are, you know, and then, but again, I just always think, I can't think past just the subjective evaluation. The question is what would be very helpful to someone is there something I can do or some method that could get them to see that that disintegration of what they want and how they're acting is disintegrated. There's no integrity between those 2 points.
Right.
And if someone's waving it off, this justification is just the classical. It's me saying anything I need to get what I want. Yeah. It's really because a lot of it is that, and that's what
you're instrumentalizing your language.
I'm making you more comfortable with how I'm acting. Yeah. So you stop getting in the way. You know, this, and that's, and why, and I think people, non-addicts, we do this regularly, and I'll just parallel to my own like experience, like with my kids. I could imagine like the best possible diet for them and the most optimal, no TV screen time ever. And sometimes I'm so tired, I'll pop the TV on for 30 minutes and let them watch them, and I'll justify it's like some animal documentary, you know, or whatever. And I'm prioritizing at their expense, maybe my comfort. Right. You know, and that's a normal, I'm not going, you shouldn't do that. I'm not beating myself up for it. I'm not perfect. That's the admission I'm not perfect. Right. So then and I think that's just a parallel to the extension of that. How far can that go? And addiction is one of those, it's the epitome of it. You know, all the way at the end of the road addiction, it's pathological, destructive, and everything is sacrificed to that end, you know, and that's so, and there's a scale to that.
And there's the religious language coming again, right? Like you make it your God and you sacrifice everything to it. Right. Like relationships, job, whatever the things are that, again, it's hard to talk about because I was going to say normal, but it's like, well, it's hard to determine what's normal per se, but if relationships are obviously very important for anyone to have any fulfillment, happiness, flourishing. Health is also something that's very fundamental, like relationships. And I would think it's somewhat safe to say that if this addiction or the thing you're addicted to or the God you're putting above all these other things, your health, your relationships, etc., starts to take a toll on those things, then those are the grounds for outside intervention, right? Someone who loves you is going to say, hey, you're destroying your relationship or your body or your mind. You know, I love you and don't want you to do this. Please stop.
Right.
But there is no bright line, actually. It is always.
Well, I would just say like anyone can do that anytime they feel. Yeah. It's like, and that's when they decide, you know, the person being affected, whenever is enough, or you think it's a problem, you can say something, you know, and I'll just back to the only thing, and this is why the only thing that really has relevance is for me to even be able to receive, right, how you see things. It's like, hey, this is hurting me, this is whatever. And my brain not go, no, it's okay because, you know, it's like it's none of your business and I'm not harming you. It's a common tropes of, I'm just doing this to myself. Even if I admit it's harmful, the majority of it is, well, I'm not affecting you. You know, and and I'm not, whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. I can't even receive outside information if I'm not open to hearing you or any other truth other than my own. And I think about tyranny. I got absolute knowledge, you know, about what's really going on. And so there's no input, like outside input and data is cut off. Right. And that's why no matter how much you love me or whatever, you can't get through to me unless I'm ready to receive it. Yeah.
So again, there's this honesty thing, right? Where if you're being dishonest with yourself, and only you can really make that determination. I mean, others can also make the determination, but it's not helpful because you're not going to listen to them. because you're being dishonest with yourself, right? So it's
it
like,
depends how far down the scale you are.
Yeah.
But definitely at some point it gets to that.
but when you look inside of yourself and you like really take inventory and you're like, okay, what have I been doing, right? Have I been missing my kid's basketball game to go drinking? You know, if that's factually, yes, I missed the game to go to the bar 30 times in a row or whatever.
Too much for me.
Yeah. Then, but it's like there's sort of two paths there. The addict would be the one who rationalizes, oh, well, I had a hard day at work or this or that, so I needed to go to the bar. But I don't know if this is the recovering addict or the person that maybe is
A moment of clarity.
going away from reciprocal narrowing, let's say.
Right.
They're being honest with themselves.
Right.
Oh, this is actually a problem. I'm missing my kid's baseball game 30 times in a row to go to the bar.
Right.
And that's like the first step forward to fixing it, right? Is you have to basically make that unconscious pattern conscious to put it in your workspace, your mental cognitive workspace. And then you can start rehabilitating the rituals and all the things over time.
Yeah.
But then the connection to truth you were just making there is like, only when you've been honest with yourself are you then open to honest feedback from others. If you're not being honest with yourself, then no matter what they say, you're just going to rationalize around it.
Right.
You know, they don't know, they don't get it, they don't know what it's like to be me, or whatever the thing is. So there's this strange sequence where like once you're honest with yourself deeply internally, then you become open to honest feedback from others.
There's an analogy. Vervaeke, like people like John Vervaeke do an amazing job about making this parallel between how like biological creatures are shaped by their environment and they shape their environment.
Yeah.
And it is
niche construction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's happening physically, like in biology, we measure this evolution. It's like the process isn't about like me being conformed by conditions, and the conditions aren't strictly just objectively there. They're being formed by beings as well.
Yeah.
And it's an interplay, and it's hard to even separate. You can see them as one process.
Yes.
The mind and body, it's like you can see as one process, body, mind, right? And then it's even the body and the environment. These are one thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so, wait, what, did you have a question? I thought about narrowing now because I think it's
we should probably define these terms too, because they come from Vervaeke, John Vervaeke, who you referenced.
He made them famous, at least.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
He's on the forefront.
That's true.
Nietzsche did a little bit of work, even with narrowing and stuff, and people have called them different things, but definitely John Vervaeke is making them popular.
Yeah, the short introduction to these two processes is that reciprocal narrowing is addiction, and reciprocal opening is love. So and again, I'm just paraphrasing here, the rough example of reciprocal narrowing is the guy that has a beer, you know, after work because he had a stressful day. And then maybe that causes him to wake up late for work the next day. So he has an even more stressful day the next day. And he has 2 beers that night, and then so on and so forth. Like, that's a very generic example, but like, that's basically it.
Right.
You keep trying to consume more of the thing that you think will help alleviate the pain. And then that thing actually creates more pain down the road, and you're stuck in that cycle.
Right.
And I'll go to the Peter Crone definition here, which is amazing, of addiction. Peter Crone, who was here, said, addiction is when you cannot get enough of something that almost works. So you just keep chasing that high or that relief or whatever the thing is. And so that's Vervaeke's, you know, reciprocal narrowing definition of addiction. And I don't want to say that the opposite of addiction is love, but he describes reciprocal opening, which is the opposite of reciprocal narrowing, as a process of love or friendship, right? That like, you will be vulnerable with me. You'll tell me something about, you know, yourself or your childhood. And then all of a sudden I will feel more comfortable to then be more vulnerable with you and tell you deeper things about me. And so like, as you meet yourself more deeply, then I feel more comfortable to meet you more deeply. And like, we can go on in this reciprocal opening of friendship or familial love, romantic love, whatever the thing is. Fellowship. Right. Yeah. And so that is like, you know, it's leading to good, healthy outcomes, you know, more relationships, more emotional awareness, more making the unconscious conscious, Whereas addiction's doing the opposite, right? It's like you're making the conscious unconscious and you're destroying things.
Blotting out.
Or let's say not destroying. Let's say you're not prioritizing things. You're deprioritizing family, relationships, health, whatever it is, below the thing you're addicted to.
Right. And those are great, like a good introduction and almost, but just listening to John, like John Vervaeke talk about these things, you start to quickly understand that even without, and I know that's just like a surface level analogy of, but it's more than just a chemical input, which changes my perception, right? I can do this with a thought. I can,
self-limiting beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like what I do is limit to limit the amount of entropy. Right. Yes. And this is immediately far out there, but it's not complicated. It's everyone almost knows this, but this is just a way to articulate a complicated process that's happening between my cognition or consciousness and the environment. And we're trying to describe this weird thing that happens when I blot something out and it's almost always for a short-term gain. Yeah. Like I did, I'll just probably keep circling around the lies because they're just the most potent. You can always see things so much clearer in the extremes. And I lie about something to myself so I can keep myself from being afraid or feeling some way I don't want to. This constricts my environment, right? My environment entropy raises. I then have to, Vervaeke calls it like I think agent and arena, right? Yeah. And it's in the interplay between the agent making a conscious choice or a turning away from, not facing the dragon, right? This is the moment where my environment shrinks, which then in turns my options shrink, which then I have to, I mean, you can go back up Jacob's ladder from there, or you're more, it's easier to keep going further down.
Yes.
And
easier in the sense that it's more expedient.
It's more expedient.
Yeah. You're creating a disastrous long-term outcome.
It is not the easiest.
Just like a lie is expedient, right? It's much easier. Like, I
get what I want right now.
Did you steal the cookies? And you're 3 are like, no,
well, here's another cookie then.
Yeah. It's easier to not get in trouble with mom, but the reality is at some point that's going to come out and, might as well face the facts up front.
Yeah.
Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. What's that saying that a lie is sweet in the beginning and bitter in the end? The truth is bitter in the beginning and sweet in the end.
That's good. Yeah. And this isn't, and I always think about, this isn't some, really what we're doing, like even right here, we're trying to flesh out the fabric of reality itself, the rules, right, that govern my life. Yeah. This is either true or it's not. Yeah. When I lie, I put in this input and there's an output, right? And that's a good way also to think about this reciprocal narrowing process. It's depending on what input goes in, right? A conscious decision, a blotting out, a taking a drug, it shrinks. There's some expedient gain I'm getting at the expense of it collapsing other options, collapsing my environment.
Yes.
Right. And that is, it can spiral to an extent that leads to like pathology,
yeah.
You know, and that's a broad term, but it's this, I can become a person just from lying to myself over and over, which changes my environment, which changes me, which spirals into each other, where I'm a completely different person than when I started.
Exactly.
Right. And I can do this without drugs.
Yes.
Drugs is just this way where almost implicit in taking it.
Yeah.
How I see the world is more constrictive.
Yeah.
Right. It's less inclusive. It's, the cost or the expense of getting ease and comfort right now. I'd like to, because I was thinking about the Federal Reserve. So even I was thinking back to when how you put, which I said I loved so much, how you talk about mechanically, right? Regardless of their intent, right? If you do this, this is a lie. And it's a great analogy. And I was thinking of the devouring mother archetype. And it's a great parallel to see that the relationship between, in case anyone like listening, so Dr. Carl Jung, you know, archetypes, it's a way to you had something to say about archetypes?
I mean, I was going to take a swing at it, but like very base level psychological templates. Right. So he also compared them to instincts. Right. It's almost like the things that come pre-installed, right? The possibilities of the psyche that come pre-installed.
There's a lot of ways. So you can look at them as different personas inside of me, different spirits. There's been all sorts of ways, but, and people have talked about Dr. Carl Jung, even though he formulated the word archetype, it's like, these are, people have been describing human action through storytelling using archetypes, you know? And, but the devouring mother archetype, it's just very useful. It's a useful lens to look at central banking, the whole apparatus, and but mostly the Federal Reserve. And I'll just stick with them because I think that that's the head of the Medusa, because nothing else could really exist without that. But as far as central banking and that whole enterprise, but even if they did have the intent of, like, the devouring mother loves a child so much, then you go, what is love? Because they love them so much that this isn't a comprehensive picture of the story.
They deceive themselves into believing they love them so much.
Right. But denial is this weird thing, because it's a lie that you don't even know that you're telling yourself. Right. Do you know there's some spot? Right. And it's very weird. It's not this explicit lie, but we're still going to consider it a lie, you know, because mechanically it does the same thing. But you know, but also we don't award people like any innocence, even though they're in denial about something. And it's very hard for them to even see that they're lying to themselves. Usually how we treat each other is as if they were lying anyways. You know, you're lying to yourself, but it's the same to me. Yeah. You know, you're lying. But the devouring mother, the child is rewarded, you know, security, safety, or whatever, at the expense of anti-fragility or stability, or like being the child doesn't get fortified to then be able to live in the world. Yes. And so if the second the mother isn't there, or once she leaves, the child's rendered useless and dies because of the overbearingness or the protection of the mother.
Overprotective parents, helicopter parents, excessive coddling. You're insulating the child from the stressors of life that make them grow. Right. And now, of course, we all want to protect our children from these stressors. But once again, where do you draw the line? Right. Like, I've heard it put that you want to let your children fall in the grass, but you try to not let them fall on the pavement, you know, something like, so you have to kind of pick your battles. But the devouring mother thing is very serious. I know a lot of people, like, there was a guy in college who I won't name, but his mom would just bail him out of every situation always, you know, like not getting a good grade, she would like, I don't know, pull some strings and get him in another class and figure it out. He'd get in trouble with the police for drinking or whatever the thing. And she'd somehow like just always getting him out of trouble and always giving him more money. He never worked and never did anything. And this poor guy like just couldn't get it together, right? He couldn't bear the consequences of his own actions. His mother was inhibiting his skin in the game, basically. Right. So he could not grow in the ways he needed to grow.
Right.
And fortunately, he finally like went and lived abroad for a long time and got his whole act together. But it's weird, right? Because the mom thinks, oh, I'm just doing everything a good, loving mother would do and just always protecting him from everything. But that the paradox is that it actually destroys in this case, it wasn't a child, it was an adult man. But it destroys your son or daughter in a very particular way.
Yeah, there's great wisdom and like maturity because first of all, it's hard. And second, I'll just say this real quick. Everyone does it, right? A bit. We're all, and the thing about the archetypes is you're possessed by all of them. And really the walk through life is just you trying to be courageous enough to not fall prey and grow away from and embody, a more holistic archetype, something like that. And really there's better ways to say it, but it's not like, well, you shouldn't be that ever, or this thing about balance or whatever.
Where do you draw the line?
You can't not be that ever. I'll even say that. Of course. So, cause you're not perfect, but, and I don't have an answer for anyone, whatever, but once I see that that's true, it's like, oh, I see that inhibiting my child from experiencing this bad thing, right? They'll hurt and them. That what I do actually is set them up to be hurt way worse later.
Yeah.
Am I? And then do I love my child?
Yeah.
And then if the answer is yes, what is most useful to my child? And then it's, I have, and then loving them becomes, right. Even my own definition of loving the child becomes get out there and get, hit the grass or the concrete,
And this could maybe even go over into tough love at some point, right?
I'll just say this real quick. Tough love is, you can think of what the devouring mother does is like soft destruction.
Yeah.
It's the inverse
opposite of tough love. Yeah.
And really it's tough love, whatever. Tough is the tough part of that is just felt for like, that's on the receiving end. What it is just love.
Well, like it too can be taken too far, right? Like, of
then
course.
I would just say this, if it's too far, then we're saying it's not useful.
Yeah. Or it's, again,
then I would say it's not love.
Where do you draw the line?
I don't know.
Man, this one's very tricky. Right? Like typically you would say the line is physical coercion. You don't do any of that. But it's like, well, parents spank their children. And some people really believe in that. They say spare the rod, spoil the child and all this. Like,
I don't know about kids' autonomy and when the right age is, because obviously whether you like it or not, infant and pre 9 months, they're 100% dependent on you. So whether you have full autonomy over that child, and then and there's a lot of like religions, a lot of them converge on this idea, and it's not even an idea. It's like I was saying, it's a fact. You have to have authority over your child because they wouldn't survive if you didn't. And then they're weaned out of that process and they become more and more autonomous when that age is. I doubt there's a specific age or some rule that should be set by anyone. And that's for each parent and or authority over a child to flesh out. And it's along the lines of when is it more useful it's like to get out there in the world more, and it's a process. It's not a moment. It's a process of being the environment or the structure that child is in that's optimized for them being exposed to the world and growing up,
and I'm reflecting now on what people like Rothbard have written in his book, The Ethics of Liberty, because he's trying to flesh out some of these weird edge cases in like a libertarian world. How would we handle this? And his conclusion was something like, when the child can run away from home and actually take care of themselves, then that's when they're actually an autonomous adult, right? If that's 13, if that's 18, if that's 23, whatever it is, like when they actually can live independent of you, that you should be willing to kind of let them go do it. Now that is also very hard because we all have heard the stories or maybe even are the stories of the kid that ran away from home at some point.
Yeah.
And, most of those stories end, I think, with the kid coming back.
I made it 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, I don't know if I made it 3 hours. But
anyway, I don't want to kill your thought, but
it's just like, it's another one of those things where you draw the line.
Yeah.
Like,
and I don't know. And really, because I think about these things not to necessarily, I'm not trying to come up with, well, when should like people in large do this,
right.
And I really
but
think.
the law tries to do that.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. But, the correlation between the devouring mother and the Federal Reserve, I think I see it as the exact same relationship, because, and to Jeff Booth's point, you are participating in it, right? We can be like, oh, they're doing this to us. And I understand that, and there's this participatory Jordan Peterson. And it's not that extreme. I thought it was extreme when he said it, but it's like the child is participating in this. There's a choice almost. There's something about that story of the archetype where the child is voluntarily exchanging and getting the security. And there's something in the child that knows, and I'm almost not talking about literal children. This is the story of the archetype. And it's the child is complicit in this relationship. They are getting like, the security or safety or protection from, or shielding from, when they should have been exposed. And they're trading up their autonomy for the protection. And that is the state and the people. That's what you do is, to the extent you give up freedom, right, for exposure to risk and entropy. And I mean, Bitcoin really like is the epitome of a lot of things. It's you're responsible now. If you want freedom, it's like you're responsible too. And the Federal Reserve, there's another like way these things map over each other. But if I need capital to like fund something, and there's low liquidity, the money's tight, and it's like you can drum up, right?
Artificial liquidity.
Right.
Yeah.
And fund this thing, and I can get what I want right now.
Right.
And
but even though it's all an illusion ultimately. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But and
it's an illusion that works in the short run, just like a lie. But then eventually the tide goes out, and you have the business cycle.
And let me like flesh this out, because how it really happens is it's like, oh, it's bad or whatever. But it's, man, I'm the guy getting the loan. I can build a building with the money. I can put people to work, and I can start producing something, with that. Yeah. Right. So, and then it's so in this way, like in the way that you never get away with a lie, not directly, right? I start producing value, right? I'm stoking the economy, just like the Keynesian said. Yeah. And then it's why it's ultimately not true is because ultimately, just like in the mother archetype, in a lower time preference setting, in a wise view of life itself, right? The whole thing is to the extent that each dollar I use to pay for the building, to fund the enterprise, is to the exact extent, if not exacerbated, the proportion that it's destructive to this whole system that business is rested in. Yeah. Right. So it's destructive to the thing that value production depends on. Right. Yeah. But look at me, I'm producing new value.
They're pouring from an empty cup. Right. Basically. Yeah.
More and more. And so in that way, that's how it's, that's how the lie catches up with, like, your business may not go under, and you actually may produce real goods and services with those money, with those credit, vehicles and or different money substitutes and all that. But it's in this way, none of us are going to get away with it.
Yes.
Right? It is devouring.
It's a distortion of economic reality.
Right.
And there is the inevitable reconciliation back to reality, just like the truth reconciling to the fork of reality when you lie. Right. And just like, that's beautiful. I want to try and just make sure I hopefully bring home the point by talking about the actual economics of that. It's like when you print money, like we said earlier, you run this fractional reserve. The money in the bank, you have to actually think even one layer deeper. It's actually a representation of real savings. And savings meaning not money in the bank per se, but the actual goods and capital we've accumulated in the world. Right? The money, the purchasing power of the money is a reflection of that. So when you increase the supply of money, you are signaling to the market that there are more goods and capital available than there actually are. So when you set out to build that building, the entrepreneur building the building actually miscalculates and thinks, oh, I can get all of this thing built for $100,000 or whatever the number is. And then as he progresses through that project, the actual scarcity of goods eventually shows up in their price. And it actually costs $140,000 or whatever to build the building. And he runs out of money and goes bankrupt 60 to 80% of the way through the project. Right. And when you have a widespread unfolding of those types of situations, that's what we call a recession.
Right.
This is the business cycle, right? You print money, you create this illusion and signal, this illusory signal to market actors that there's more goods and capital available than there actually are. Everyone gets to work building some stuff. Then eventually you get the reconciliation to reality in the form of there not actually being all that goods and capital, the price signal indicated, and then you get the collapse.
Right. We all pay the bill.
And then what do? We print more money. Yeah. And then we literally sow the seeds for an exponentially larger disaster next time. Right. And this is why we go from printing $700 billion in 2008 to 8,000 billion or $8 trillion in 2020.
Right.
You know, it's an order of magnitude increase. And so this is that addictive cycle.
Like the addict needing the lie for the lie to
compounding. Right. And just like that addict eventually ends up in the ditch.
Right.
The currency ends up hyperinflated at some point.
Right. And just as a side note, and really shouldn't get sidetracked by this, but Bitcoin, because I think about this, it's inevitable collapse, right? I can see this metaphysically. This is true, like from every angle, right? Scientifically, economically, the collapse is inevitable. And then I was thinking, well, if I opt out, what does that mean exactly? And it's almost like a split. Mm-hmm. There's that happening, right? That divergence from reality. Yeah. There's that fork. And then Bitcoin seems to be another that can exist parallel to that. And if you opt out of that forking system, what is actually happening is you're in a new system totally. And then when the reconciliation happens, you actually do avoid it. You're actually not in it. But, and then we can get down to the downstream effects of everyone around you collapsing. Do you know this?
That's
now people are at your
back.
Front door, no matter. And I'll push back on myself.
And I was going to say,
right. But as far as, and this isn't about your life being like perfectly fine. Right. Everything will change for you. Yeah. But just the by and large, or in a long enough time frame, always it's your purchasing power. This is what you keep. Yeah. That you get to keep what you've keep the value you've created in the world, you know, and
assuming there's a functional market economy.
Right, of course. I mean,
that's where, like, if the deviation gets too big, you know, and you get a massive hyperinflation or a war or something, it's like, well, then there's just no goods or services flowing. It doesn't matter if you got 1 million Bitcoin in cold storage, like there's nothing to buy.
Right.
So like,
I'm on board with that. I'm not, you know, Bitcoin is not a fix all or whatever. But I don't undermine it either. Yeah. It's almost like a godsend, you know what I'm saying? But
perfectly engineered money or optimal money. It's, as long as the market's working, but it actually helps the market work too. So there's that.
But more, and almost like our conversation we're having now, I'm kind of, what's more important is, I don't know how to say it, not who I am, but like my own like fragility, right? Like morally, physically, all like health, my mind, all these things, who I am, like, this is where real like freedom is found in any condition, right? It's economic collapse, this, that. There's other tools like Bitcoin that's aligned with truth, and it's like it can finally at least keep the arbitrary theft of my purchasing power, do you know, which is very useful. But at the end of the road, to even use the purchasing power effectively, if my morals are skewed, if my perceptions are skewed, if I don't have them prioritized right, I'll be buying things that undermine things that are actually more valuable. You know, and I can even use that capital I've saved to the death of me. You know, so it's obvious that to be the final frontier of what to get privy to and what to gain in wisdom is, you know, personal growth or whatever. And I just think looking at, so addiction is this very fruitful thing, or the solution to addiction, whatever that is, whatever you find in that process are the exact same instruments that make any life better. To this, however you overcome that, are they going to be the exact same tools that you should keep doing that to get perpetual growth or spiritual growth.
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. Onramp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-sig vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which that have unilateral control over your assets. More than just security, Onramp simplifies inheritance and estate planning, ensuring your Bitcoin wealth moves seamlessly to your loved ones without the risk and complexities of self-custody. Easily designate beneficiaries right in the Onramp dashboard, eliminating the need for unreliable treasure maps or other complex key sharing schemes. You can also avoid the probate process and ensure your heirs receive their Bitcoin securely with legal title transfers designed to keep your wealth intact for generations. As Bitcoin continues to appreciate, Onramp helps you seamlessly access financial services, from inheritance and insurance to trading, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security. And importantly, the onboarding process is fast and frictionless. I set up my own Onramp account, and it was far easier than dealing with hardware wallets or traditional self-custody setups. The team walked me through everything step by step, making sure I had a secure, reliant setup for my Bitcoin wealth. Secure your generational wealth with confidence. Schedule a consultation with the Onramp team today at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Of those tools, what else is there? I'm only picking up right now on like radical truth or radical honesty. It's like you got to get super honest and truthful with yourself, and then also hear that feedback from others and then act upon it, right? Because you can only, right? You can get real with yourself and see some problems, but then we all have blind spots. So you need the mirror of relationship and honest feedback to like work on that stuff. So like what else in that toolbox is there? Or what am I missing, I guess, in the toolbox?
It's going to feel like I'm dancing around it, or I don't have a solution or ideas of what would be helpful. But I just think that there's probably no more important tool than radical truth. What that looks like, how do I do it? There's all sorts of people with all sorts of opinions and ideas. And I'm actually not a person, even though I've been afflicted with a catastrophic addiction, right? And brought to that pathological point. Like my fingernails stopped growing, cuts on my body stopped healing.
Wow.
Like I couldn't look for like 6 months. I couldn't look up past people's knees, you know, and I didn't mean to. I was at the tail end of that reciprocating narrowing process.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like a normal 8-year-old one time.
Yeah.
And then it's like I ended up in a place where I was so psychologically closed off and my environment was so small. And I didn't have the word, I wouldn't describe it this way back then, but it's to be in that place and then to find myself out of it. Yeah. And then to be like, well, it's like, this is what you should do and stuff. It wasn't even, it's not that clear to me, do you know? Cause I've also, like you said, I work with, and I spend a lot of time with people in alcoholic and drug addiction, and you know, as peers almost, I look at them. You know, I understand. I'm not a medical profession, a professional in the field or anything. And what worked for me was, it manifested in different ways after this, but the genesis is truth. Yeah. You know, and the big first truth was like help, you know, like I need help. Like I can't do this, you know, that was the truth.
Wow.
You know,
that's
really
important to hear, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Like probably, maybe not exclusively, but the first truth for many people that are actually in addiction that you'll discover within is help.
Yeah.
Right. Because you will see, oh my God, I'm doing something I don't actually want to be doing.
Right.
Therefore it's an unconscious pattern. Therefore I need help.
Right. Yeah. There's again, a lot of fruit that comes out of thinking through, you know, or even listening to people, how they had recovered. Almost always I like listen to other people, like, and it's not just with chemical addiction, with them finding themselves in an unflattering place and coming out of it, right. And becoming something more than they were. Yeah. And anytime I hear any story like that, I get great insight or I derive certain useful tools that are applicable to me right now. You know, it's because it's hard to hear just a collective of tools of how to fix anything. Yeah. And that's just becomes like a standard that's applicable to everyone all the time over, you know, under any circumstances. So what it seems to be is like, if you're open to receiving help, you get what you need in the way you need it. That seems, the world almost seems to reveal.
If you knock, the door shall be opened.
Right. It's almost like that. If you just seek, it's almost, you'll get it in that way. So there's no particular.
If you knock, the door shall be open. Yeah. I think about that one a lot, and this doesn't apply to addiction for me, but I'm actually like, I have many aspirations in life, right? Like trying to orange pill the world with a show like this. You know, my wife and I want to have a lot of kids, and we're trying to build our relationship properly. You know, we're doing therapy and shadow work and meditation, all these different things. I have a lot of aspirations. We joke that we want it all, you know, and I do kind of want it all. Like I want to have meaningful life, contribute to people's lives meaningfully, also have a family, like all the things.
What you need reveals itself to you as you need it in the way that you need it, if you're open. Or if you're asking for help, that's what I said.
Knocking and the door shall be open. It's just, I find myself in prayer, and when, you know, whatever, you're going through the struggle and you're kind of having the internal dialogue, like I'm trying to knock on the right doors with my heart or something. It's like, but that also seems tricky because you're like, well, is this thing that I think that I want, is this the right goal? And, you know, sometimes Peterson will challenge you on, it's like, if the world's not manifesting itself to you the way you would like it to, well, then you should reconsider your goals, right? You might be aimed at the wrong thing. So there's always kind of this debugging mode of like, well, am I aimed at the right thing? And this is, you know, gets straight into role models and meta role models like Christ and all that. It's like, you can kind of use that as a standard by which to evaluate. You know, this is why people used to wear the "What would Jesus do" bracelets or whatever. Yeah. Like there's some truth to it. Like you actually do need, and it doesn't have to just be Christ. You know, you can use these other role models. Socrates is one of Vervaeke's favorites. I think Cato, who inspired a lot of the founding fathers, he's up in there too. Satoshi even. But you can actually use these different, what are these? These are
North Stars.
I'll stick with role models basically, but it's just a standard. It's a standard by which to evaluate your own actions and the results of those actions. And so,
thinking about role models, this is also this emergent thing. This isn't even a thing I choose. Admiration is a thing that happens to me.
Right.
I find myself in affinity to something, right? And so it's beckoning or calling something out of me towards it.
Right.
And like Peterson, because when you were saying that, I was thinking it's also simultaneously the judge. It's the crushing weight that it's everything that I'm not also at the same time.
Judge.
Right.
Yeah.
And so no wonder why you turn away from it and don't try to grow along those lines, because it's painful.
Yeah.
But it's also the thing that beckons you, so.
Right.
And it goes back and
so
this
like moths to the flame, we're drawn towards the pain kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's really, we find the pain along the way, but what we're really drawn to is that it's what I want to be. But again, the want it's almost happening to me.
Yeah.
It's calling me to be that.
And it's manifest in other people too, right? Like again, back to Rene Girard. I mean, not entirely. It's not like you want to be one person necessarily, but there's probably a constellation of people that you're like trying to aspire to be more like.
The best out of a few
exactly.
people. Right?
This guy's the best talker. This is the best athlete, money, like whatever your domains are. Yeah. And you're trying to like create, again, just like your personality, you're trying to amalgamate all these things into one you.
Just like a archetypical story.
Yeah.
It's the amalgamation of all of the highest things that drew most people towards, right? And those aspects of whatever that is comprise a symbol is an archetype, right? It's the amalgamation of the affinity itself, but the way that it manifests it in people's minds. But
the patterns that people have affinity toward.
Right.
Yeah. The crystallization of that. Right? Yeah. And then you crystallize all those together and that's like Christ, right?
Right. That's Yeah. There's a hierarchy of aims or North Stars and it's like at the top is God. Mm-hmm. That's what God is at the very least, not that it's not.
And this is why it's like inseparable from human consciousness. I think it's like all of this architecture, there's a lot of different languages used to describe it, but it all seems to have the kind of this hierarchical ranked priority architecture.
Right.
And then we also have shared realities. And so then we create these hierarchies of value basically. And at the top of that hierarchy of value is God by definition.
It's our best attempt to understand the ineffable.
Yeah.
We, the map's not the territory. We're all confined to, our limited sensory organs. Yeah. There's more light waves than we pick up. There's more audio waves, everything's condensed. Reality is more than I know and more than I perceive.
Yes.
And, so of course we are limited. That's why there's a thing that called ineffable or concepts that are outside of not only my understanding, my articulation. I said the same thing, by the way, like the word ineffable would not make any sense if all of language was capturable by propositions. Right.
So the fact that it makes sense, I mean, that's enough proof of God right there. And then also just one last thing, the hierarchy that it's action, this is where praxeology comes into play. It's like, that's what you're actually doing in action, right? You're moving through your ranked hierarchy of values, right? Like I value to eat breakfast, now go to work and it's nested. So there's this deep connection. As we said, God is at the top of that hierarchy by definition, but the hierarchy is navigated through action.
Right.
And so there's ancient theologians that called God actus purus, like pure action or absolute action. And so I just like to draw that out too, that it's not just this kind of symbolic structure that might be useful or might not, like just some arbitrary categories we chose. Like, no, this is like praxeology. This is, you are an aiming creature, always moving towards what you find to be valuable, as are we all. And then in our creation of shared realities, we create a similar hierarchy at the top of which is God.
Resonates a lot with me.
Yes.
Because I thought in my earlier years, I like I love, say, riffing like this, talking about nearly anything that I find interesting, right? That's calling me, that I just find interest in. I do it like I listen to music. I do, because I just enjoy it, like a hobby.
Yeah, same.
I'm divorced largely from thinking it's going to do something for me. There's something to really get out of this, right?
It's philosophically inclined.
Right. Because I've ran into pontificating and or even understanding conceptually why I should be better, you know, why I should not be disturbed. And like, it's like go through stoicism. And then, man, I can understand why. I can believe in it in my mind and conceptually grasp things. And I wake up the same day, me, you know, I'm yelling in traffic. And then at some point in my life, I had to, out of necessity, find out how to bridge, how to embody things that I could conceptually grasp. I could see why it'd be better to be Christ-like or something. It's like pick any, nearly anything was better than I had going on. But, you know, the sutras, whatever it was gripping me and it was calling me, and understanding it or having the words for it wasn't enough. I'd wake up and I was still in it.
Yeah.
And it really came down to, there's a saying, take an action, change a thought.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the inverse. I thought it was think my way in the correct way of living.
So true.
And there's this great, and it's not just action though, right? No. There's also obviously this, really going down. And if you ever,
the mind helps so much with the aiming, right? Like the action is always embodied necessarily, even the thinking, right? You can only do it in a body.
You can pick the direction.
Yeah. And it's, you're using the matrix of your embodied experience to do all of the abstraction and think. This is why all language is metaphorical. But then when you get into the mind, you can go very far, a lot of different directions really fast, right? You can run simulations side by side and then try to aim at the right thing after that process of evaluation. But ultimately, all the experience itself is going to be in the body.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of consequences to that too, right? Like, I had a breath work, shadow work session the other day, and I'm amazed how much I think the body, there's that saying, the body keeps score. Like, I feel such a physical release going through these emotional releases that we're getting to through breath work and shadow work, that, the psychosomatic connection is so radical. Like, you know, I already like appreciated it or thought it existed to some extent, but I'm like, I kind of think it's more primary than we recognize it to be. Because I've tried a lot of like supplements and stuff to try to feel better in certain ways, but this was actually getting to the point very quickly.
Right.
And intensely.
You can think about and you understand the body and mind is connected. This is one system. This is one thing.
Yes.
We arbitrarily think of them as separate, but you had an experience. You felt that that's true.
Exactly.
You know, and it's
exactly
like that.
That's why it's hard to articulate too, in a way.
It's conceptual and then it's like embodied, and there are two different types of knowledges. You know? But I think of like wisdom sometimes and I think it's the difference between it's embodied. You can almost at that point forget the words and forget how to talk about it. And if you act it out, it's worth way more than ever knowing it. But
I've been reading this book. I just started it. A guest gave it to me yesterday, and I opened it. And I'm really glad he did, because I can't put it down. It's called Wisdom Jesus, and it's getting into this a lot. Like, there's a reason Christ spoke in parables, and there's another book I've been reading too, where like it gets at that point where it's like the concepts, like, don't get overly concerned about the concepts. And I say that as someone who's like really concerned about concepts. I think a lot about philosophy and reading and all this stuff, but there does come a point, and I think we kind of flirt with that point on retreat, right? It's like we get to come to the end of the road for the philosophizing in a way, and you're just like, it is all action.
Incarnate.
It's all action. Yeah, incarnate, right? Be like carne, like related to flesh, in the flesh. Incarnate, the word, which again is back to Christ is the word made flesh. You know, there's that connection again. But it's an experience that's by necessity difficult or impossible to articulate. But it's also the most real thing you can experience is the ontological primacy of action.
Maybe the most important path to walk And when you walk other paths, they really can fall into that. It's almost, it's a thing you can align with anything else. It's not, if you do that, you'll be foregoing doing other things.
Yes.
You can align almost anything worth doing along those lines.
Yes.
Right. And it's the meta. And I don't know where, but meta is above, or to see things from above.
Yeah.
And that's the meta path. Right?
Yeah.
It's the one that all other paths are correctly integrated into.
Yes.
Something like that. But
yeah, you hit it with the word worth, right? That it's, and again, it's kind of a monetary metaphor to some extent, but there's obviously deeper meaning. Your net worth is not your worth as a human. Although in fiat world, like, there's a distortion.
People act like it.
People act like
that's
it
another thing.
In fiat world.
The signal part. So again, back to the parallels. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, go.
Okay. The parallels between, I went to school for, it's like econ, but you got brainwashed through college and business management and stuff. And, but price, I've understood, and I've deepened my understanding of how true the metaphor of the price being the signal to like the network, right? Or the organism of the economy, right? It is the signal. And you can look in any other system and easily understand distorting a signal leads to pathologies, physical and mental in beings. And chemical distortion it's quite literally, when you take drugs or period, what you're doing on a physiological level is distorting the signals your brain would normally be receiving.
Right.
Right. And this, again, downstream from that, leads you to postpone atonement with things that you should be facing. Right. Or, and you can, distorting your own chemical signals, you can just, the litany of things that come from that and the way that manifests are, I think, self-evident. But the economy, we're just really revisiting things that have already been fleshed out, like Mises and Minger and all sorts of, we'll say Austrian economists to a larger extent, but even, I'm not going to cite everyone, because not only, what's that number? Dunbar's number. I'm like really running out of names to remember. And but basically, back to the point I was making, it's almost, we forgot in this past like few hundred years, we forgot, maybe a couple hundred years, how much the signal of price, if you distort it by printing money, how much distortiveness is downstream from that. And because there's a lot in China and stuff, I wish I'd remembered the book, but there are people have like written about this. People have, more importantly than written, people have experienced the distorting signaling via capital and what it leads to. And it is, on a societal scale, pathological, right? Just like an individual. It leads to the same lies, deceptions, information wars, ideologies, all these things that are downstream from printing money. You start to gain insight into why exactly it's true. And a lot has to do with the signaling.
Yes.
Why people go one way when they normally would have gone another is purely because the information they received. Yes. But another parallel to addiction.
It's so fundamental, actually, right? And this is, even physicalism today, like people that think everything's physical. Now, when you actually pursue that philosophy to the end of its road, you end up in information, because you end up in the quantum, right? And it's all probabilistic, and there is nothing there. There is no solid.
Matter.
It's all energy, frequency, and vibration and probability, basically, at kind of the quantum layer. So even physicalism taken to its extreme self-negates. Right. And so you have to appreciate that reality that is it's almost everything signaling, right? Everything is, well, this is the whole notion of Platonic oneness, right? The whole thing is united, the principle of unity itself, so that everything you do affects everything else and vice versa. Right. And to your point, on worth, right? What did you say? Postponing atonement was very interesting. It reminded me again of the deviation. Right. Right.
That is
and atonement, Vervaeke at 1 mint, right? There was 1, you've deviated it or diverged it into 2, the map and the territory, but the map does not represent the territory. And then at some point there has to be atonement when the truth comes out, as it inevitably does. And so you're delaying that reconciliation to reality, whether you're telling multiple lies to cover up the original lie and so on and so forth, or you're printing more money and you're having an economic recession and you're printing more money and it gets exponentially worse. And then the atonement also gets exponentially more painful. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We want higher frequency resolution or higher frequency atonement.
Right.
Or reconciliation to reality, right? The reconciliation of the representation to the territory.
Right.
And by doing that, you get a tighter grip on what's true and real.
Yeah. And it's more sustainable.
And again, it's more sustainable.
You don't build a house of cards.
Right.
It's about to blow
because
away.
If it blows up too big, there's the catastrophic forest fire, right? Where like if the underbrush, if governments intervened and the underbrush built up, the fire burns so hot, it burns off the topsoil and nothing grows back.
Right.
Exactly. So you want to avoid the conflagration. You want to have high frequency atonement.
I would, and I know we're talking metaphors. I would tweak the metaphor to, instead of how high, it's really about the foundation of that structure and or the material it's built out of. That's right. Because the ceiling to human value production or abundance, we don't know the ceiling, but it's the fact that how fragile it is.
Yes.
Right. That the system that we're operating in, how fragile the system is. Yeah. That's what it weakens. That's the house of cards. Yeah. Right. And it's like, well, how big the house can get, it's like, we don't know, to affinity. Yeah. But how it's built is important. And it's, and this is
because we're dealing with that asymmetry of it's so much easier to destroy than create.
Right.
Right. That's like almost something that's built into nature as well. And so this kind of flirts with the purpose of evil that I've thought of as like evil's like quality assurance testing for the integrity of the good.
Oh, wow.
That you need good to like really stand the test of time.
That's good. Yeah.
But there's a lot of different ways to build a bridge, for instance.
Right.
But you need the test of time basically to really sort out which one's best.
And I guess the test, right?
Yeah. I guess for us, unenlightened two-legged apes, maybe there's a point where we could, pass this and just keep evil and like sort of potential, like it doesn't need to be made actual.
Yeah.
But up until this point in our development, it seems like evil has constantly tested and pushed back on the good. You have this opponent processing between good and evil.
You could say that's the process that makes good.
Yeah.
Because is it good, like virtue?
But they also interdefine one another, right? It's like up and down or hot and cold. It's like, okay.
But it's also, and it's all the interplay between not even just two opposites, two contending forces.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy that we could talk about money me and you could probably talk about anything and end up, and it always kind of bottoms out.
Comes back to Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. It always back to Bitcoin.
It all comes back to Bitcoin.
And then it's like Bitcoin's a manifestation of and reflects the principles best of the underlying, like we're trying to tease out the reality, like the rules of life. Why, like when I go this way, does this happen? When we put certain inputs into life, why do certain outputs come out? And are those true always, all the time? Those are, so the more axiomatic or fundamental the truth is, or the rule, it's, it's more true, but that's the philosophy to a great extent. I think that's what it's all just
philosophizing is,
trying to tease out what are the rules.
Yeah. And I think the bottom, the metaphysics I subscribe to now after following Vervaeke for a long time, and he follows, I shouldn't say he follows, I'm not going to speak for him, but he speaks very highly of this book by James Filler, where it's basically positing that relationality is ontological ground. So that there are no things, there are no, what he calls the relata, which are the things related, that actually the relationship is ontologically prior to the things related. So we're just in kind of this pure continuum. And then the relata are the actual, we're ascribing these boxes around things. This is subjective, this is objective, this is hot, this is cold, this is up, this is down. It's all kind of perspectival. Like it's they're perspective or category structures that we find useful as acting creatures in this continuum. And so, yeah, I think it's like the logos, basically, right? The logos is also a lot of these things, right? It's been translated variously as the word or ratio, but it's obviously different and beyond that. Vervaeke often talks about the through line, you know, like you can't see all the aspects of any object simultaneously. There's always one aspect of it hidden from view.
Right.
But somehow there's a connection between all the aspects that makes it one thing. So there's like an integrity of the object that he says is like the logos of the object. So it has a lot of these kind of strange meanings, but I think that's what we're wrestling with when we talk about money, Bitcoin, language. Like that's the common denominator between all these relational media.
Yeah.
They're signaling systems, and when they're distorted, they have very catastrophic consequences because it's like the signaling is pervasive, basically. So if the signaling is distorted, then there's pervasive destruction, corruption, whatever term you want to use.
What is money?
Yeah.
You know, and there's a million answers for it, but it's a perfect definition of it is symbolized time and energy, which is the all of everyone's means to everyone's ends, you know, which can be perfectly subjective and all that, but then you could say all of those things are the things that matter. Yeah. You know, it's the money represents the culmination of everything that means anything to everyone. And what happens when people steal it, distort it, you know, and mess the signal up, and it's like the conclusion is bad, you know, bad stuff. And then you could say more the bad, the most, it's very meaningful actually to talk about, to it's weird. I thought it was weird of myself being a very like artistic, like flowy, like wish I grew up in the Woodstock times type guy. This weird affinity I have to understanding money, you know, not how to make it, not the principle of money. You know, what is it? It's very strange. And it's because it's very meaningful. You know, it's not what I thought it was. You know, I just had preconceived notions or prejudice against the word, and I affiliated with greed. And then he reads Ayn Rand and all that gets fixed real quick. And then, but it's very meaningful.
Product of growing up in fiat world, right? It is. That we have that kind of relationship.
Right.
I mean, not everyone and not necessarily, but it seems like the relationship to money is generally less healthy than it otherwise would be.
Right.
If we're in an honest money world. I think people don't even talk about it that much. I mean, maybe we will now because Bitcoin was such a like crazy thing. But even in a few generations, Bitcoin's probably going to be boring.
You're right. Ideally it will be.
Yeah.
So it'll disappear into the background.
Yeah. But this idea of it distorting the logos, I think it's kind of a radical claim, and there's probably a lot of people that are going to wag their finger at you.
You can say it's evil. I think it's perfectly fine to call. I mean, it depends what you mean by evil, but if it distorts the logos, then I would just say categorically it's.
Well, which is to say, if I try to use Darwinian language, like it's distorting the apparatus by which we adapt to the changing world. So if you inhibit adaptivity itself,
right, which is creativity, which is
well, it's also relation with like truth over time, right? That you're adapting to new circumstances and changing. If you're getting good signals and good information, but if you get bad information or false signals, you're maladapted, right? It becomes existential, which you could call evil, I think, right? It's like you're moving away from God. You're moving away from the logos. You're distorting the logos. You're moving towards something that's evil, right? And in the sense that evil destroys everything, even itself, I think.
Right.
Chesterton or somebody said. So
it's a great definition.
Yeah. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin upends everything that state-sponsored schools teach us about money. For those who get the importance of Bitcoin, it is important that we have a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your credit or debit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats on every purchase without even thinking about it. Coinbits also provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals into cold storage to minimize your risk and stay sovereign over your Bitcoin. My favorite Coinbits feature is Coinbits Plus, which gives you the best exchange rate on Bitcoin. It even gives you real-time feedback on how well you are doing on your savings plan. With Coinbits Plus, power users can save more money to buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more means Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need to do with Bitcoin. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that is Coinbits, BITS.app/breedlove. Well, and we were talking about it at the retreat about addiction and money printing, and we had a good riff on it.
Right.
And I was just like, oh yeah, we got it. I think about it all the time. Like it's one of the most
the best analogy.
Important angles for understanding the devastation of money printing.
Right. So I think this is why I would say anything about this guy, Roland Hazard. Insignificant to a lot of people, not a big historical event. He was just a drunk. Mm-hmm. But I think it is useful to look into, to understand human addiction and you find solutions to it, or something resembling. And I'm not a guy who's going to get up here and say prescriptively, this is how you solve addiction. That's just, if anything I've learned, I know less and less as time goes on, but except one thing is to make myself available, and to be truthful. Those are the two things I figured out. Those two qualities rectify addiction, to give people time and to speak the truth. But outside of that, like, there's no methods or nothing prescriptive that would come out of me. And so to what extent it'd be useful to figure out how you can rectify your own addictions, I think the solutions would also be a great analogy for the money. I think if there's a parallel with the problem, there's also these great analogies and parallels with the solution. And one immediate one I think of is Bitcoin is the truth, in a few different ways, in this literal way, in all sorts of ways. And it rectifies the problem of addiction. Yeah. And, so Roland Hazard is a guy, he was a drunk that was, I'll say this, Frank Buchman, he was an American theologian that started this group in 1921. In 1928, it became what's called the Oxford Group. And it was like a religious conversion type, like fellowship of people. And so that exists. And I'll set that aside for now. Roland Hazard was a guy who wanted to stop drinking, saw it was destructive, and for many years, right, over and over, like Groundhog's Day, finding himself in the unflattering place of departure, could not drink, over and over, and kept getting a high resolution to stop and felt he was on his way, and then boom, he was drunk one more time. And that's the story of Roland Hazard. And he traveled to Europe, visited our favorite Swiss doctor, Dr. Carl Jung, and he, under the care of Dr. Carl Jung, was diagnosed with Dr. Carl Jung, not just an alcoholic, but the powerless variety, right? This variety of alcoholic that is so far down the scale on that that reciprocal narrowing path, that the combination of alcohol and not explicit lies to other people, but lies to himself has landed him in this place where Dr. Carl Jung can't reach him. And he's like the best in the business at the time, you know, and like we think he's famous now. He had great authority in medical practice and psychology back then, you know, at his, when he was alive. And Roland Hazard was affluent enough to be under his care. Dr. Carl Jung described him as this, gave the diagnosis was, you're outside of my reach. No human aid can help you, you know, and Roland Hazard describes that experience as, you know, hell closed the gates on me with a clang, you know, and he felt, well, it's like, this is it. And he asked Dr. Carl Jung, is there any exception, you know? And he said, yes, there is. And Dr. Carl Jung described a phenomenon that had been happening since the dawn of humans, where deep, you call it vital, spiritual, or religious experiences, right, has pulled men out from that place he's in. But no amount of emotional appeal from loved ones, pleading, no amount of wants or willpower inside the person whose addiction can get stopped. And if they do find themselves stopped, can't stay stopped, which is the real problem. And really it's this dividing line between physical addiction, right? If you can give my sweet grandma, God rest her soul, opiates, and she will be physically addicted. She cannot help. It doesn't matter how truthful she is, how whatever. There's a physical quality to addiction, and then there's seemingly certain types of people are even when they get physically pulled away from it, why do they ever return? Like the term relapse or something. It's once you're not physically addicted anymore and you see how destructive it is, right? It's never worked for you. Why ever return to it? And there's common trivial thoughts like, well, this time it'll be better. This time I'll keep it under control. And some people do, you know, and this is a person that is, they were addicted and they returned to it. They use it in excess. It really, you know, they lost a business over whatever, but they don't need abstinence, like complete abstinence. They just need to come back and manage it better. Don't let it go off the rails this time. People do this, you know. Like I said, there's a distinct entity of people that seemingly for some reason, and Dr. Carl Jung calls this a spiritual feature. They're spiritually sick. Yeah. And I'm saying I'm gonna say words like God, spirituality, spiritual experience. I'm not even saying I'm not going to define them, you know, but I would say if you're listening to this, it's any preconceived notions you have of the words, set them aside for now. He means something, right?
May I offer one for spirit actually that I really like? I'm going to try to attribute this one. I think it's Heidegger, but he said that spirit is the I that is in we and the we that is in I. So again, it's back to this pure relationality. Like, you know, you can take my perspective and I can take yours. And that's the source of like game theory and the reciprocal opening of love and all these things. So it's this, this very effective feature that we have as spiritual animals, I guess.
And that is a fact. And I can say addiction is, right, the distance from you feeling that, right, the actual, your experience feeling like that, like the interconnectedness and or being further away from it.
That's right.
Farther into delusion. And the delusion is that you're not a part of.
Yes.
Right. And this
the separateness.
Right. And so that's another way to describe what addiction is. It's the opposite of connection, you know, and, but the objective fact of your life is that you are part of all, and it's something like everything is love and you know, and it grounds out in something like that, do you know?
And all is part of you somehow too, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's somehow through the heart seems to be like that. That seems to be the interface organ with the most of all, you know?
And not the physical heart.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There's other things too, where, like, I don't know, I've seen these, no expert in this by any means, but the heart apparently has like a vortex geometry to it, you know? And then we see a lot of that in, you know, celestial bodies, meteorology, plants, like there's this vortex, you know, Fibonacci
as above,
sequence.
so below.
Exactly. It's everywhere. So it's like of all the organs of ours, like that seems like the one that would be tapped into the the golden ratio that is, interlacing all things. Right. So,
but,
and it has a nice poetic kind of thing to it as well,
Yeah, I mean, people have been saying it forever.
Yeah, and we talked about too at the retreat, like Christ is king because he led with a heart. That was sort of the defining feature.
Yeah,
and then closest to truth.
It's so funny, like being a kid and hearing like tropes and or old adages, and be like, bah, and then I was referring to before we started just that Bitcoin. I mean the bell curve meme, and you could apply it to almost anything. It's like a 5-year-old can give you some advice, and it's as true as you can get.
Yeah,
and it's like and you grow up, and it's like you overthink things, and you figure everything out just to arrive back to the thing that you started with. And it's like the analogy I use with it's like you buy Bitcoin because it's the first crypto you hear about or whatever. And then you go, it's like, do all the math and, the analyze charts and go into the shitcoin rabbit hole, and you emerge through wisdom and through time back where you started. Yeah. And so old adages are like that. And so even this podcast, like we're talking about like things up in the middle. It's like, because what you do is you flesh out why it's true.
Yeah.
And that's why you end back up there if you're lucky. And so you're a connected being, you're a spiritual being, everything is love. That's reality. Why are you feeling so different? And the process of recovering itself is not figuring it out just in your head, which helps to give you context, but to start to embody and act towards those ends, which brings you back to closer to the truth, which is connectiveness.
Yes.
And now you don't need a reprieve from your reality. Right now you don't need to escape. It's like now there's nothing to like fix, because the ease and comfort you've been seeking and alcohol, spirit. There's something to that. It's people are, and this isn't all people. There's people prone, and that we can consider addicts. Like I'm one of them. It's not all you are or whatever this, but there's a defining feature between some people that can manage it and some people that can't. And they're seeking really all the way down. It's just love. They're seeking. It doesn't look like that,
right?
Because they're angry, they're stealing from you,
seeking a relationship with the sacred,
right? And it's not like necessarily they're consciously seeking that, but it's that feeling, that God-shaped hole, or however you want to say it, is the lack of the experience of love, and not love from other people. It's not that. It's love itself. It's
self-love in a way.
Yeah.
Well, you're not being honest with yourself.
Right.
So that's a pretty bad foundation to build a relationship with yourself.
Right. And back to Roland Hazard.
Yeah.
So he gets this diagnosis, and he wasn't explicit as far much as I can read about him in letters between people, in like the what do you call it? Basically the history of these events. He wasn't like lying. He was explicitly open, it's like, a lot like towards the end of this addiction. So he wasn't lying to other people necessarily. That wasn't his problem, but you find out it's like these lies that you tell yourself. Jeff Booth, when he was on the podcast, you'd ask him, how do you turn that sign around? Right. The sign that's on your forehead. And it's like, and I think this is akin to that process. How to turn your sign around is the same thing as seeing yourself and everyone else. And it is this inquiry into truth, and it has something to do with the rectification and or the solution for a person that is past human aid with addiction, and then also the genesis behind everyone's recovery is always a low time preference decision. It's always predicated on them making some low time preference decision. It's for the first time in a long time, I'm going to pay now to play later. It's always, that's what detox is. That's why any submission into a rehab, any getting honest about something to someone.
Investment again.
Right. and it's investment for your future self. And again, that's just like interpersonal relationships. It's the relationship with your future self. You're finally honoring and caring for them.
So does it, when people come into a certain level of time preference, that they're able to step into that rehab center for the first time? Is it something like that?
I don't know when, but it's definitely, I'll leave it at, it is all, that's what it looks like always. It's always predicated. They almost can't get free without this initial low time preference decision, for the first time extending a hand to their future self and caring for them more than they care for them, how they feel right now.
I love that, because it goes back to the relationality, that like the most fundamental relationship you have, maybe not the most fundamental, but maybe though, actually, like you deciding what you're going to do now, in the scope of the greater good. I hate to use that term, but you could not only your own greater good, like what's best for you health wise, wealth wise, whatever, but also hopefully aiming at something beyond yourself, at life beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're really tuned into that, your other relationships follow.
Yeah. Yeah. This is perfect, because the rest of the story, and I'll speed it up, is the guy, Frank, that started that organization. Roland Hazard gets that diagnosis, comes back to America, and is seeking a religious or spiritual experience, and there's no, ayahuasca compounds around him or mushrooms or whatever. And the way he seeks it out is through this thing, the Oxford group, and he's looking for a religious conversion. And there's ideas there that have permeated through the ages of, it's atonement. It's like truthfulness. It's based on the four absolutes. It's like purity. I forget them all, but it's honesty, purity, love, and self-sacrifice. I don't want to butcher it, but but in that, an important part of this Oxford group is to carry their how do you say
evangelical?
Yeah. So he's carrying this message, trying to convert and or bring into the Oxford group other people that are struggling. One is this guy, Ebby Thatcher. He's like at a court case. They're about to lock this guy up forever for alcoholic insanity. He's going to go to the insane asylum, and they convince the judge, because they had some ties and family members in the Oxford group, to release this guy under their care. Ebby Thatcher's going through this. They're all kind of staying sober. And then Ebby Thatcher reaches out to an old friend of his that also is struggling with alcohol addiction. And he shows up at his house and tells them about his experience, how two, people had came, and he was in that place where Dr. Carl Jung talked about. He considered himself powerless to this. He's that far down the scale, and God saved him from it. And Bill Wilson, like me, is like, oh my God, this guy's drunk on religion. He's a zealot, he's drunk on religion, and that's how Bill talks about this experience. But Ebby says something, well, you can come up with your own conception. You just it's like, you have to believe that it's like, there's something more than you, right? And if you're willing to believe that, and you seek, make a certain decision, which is to prioritize seeking and serving that, God can do for you what you can't do for yourself. And so Bill W. and Bill Wilson is the person who started the organization Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was through, and that's kind of like the birth of it. And that's the birth of the idea that AA was predicated on. And it was two important parts. One was, there's something more powerful than you, and you're acting as if it's like you're the alpha omega, right? You're the end all be all. It's your power. It's like you are your way, the highway, and there's nothing above you, right? And Ebby kind of opened him up. It's like, even if you don't understand it, even if you can't really conceive it or come up with attributes, or tell me what God looks like, all you have to do is be willing to believe that's possibly there, right? And that's enough. And it's the mustard seed. I
love it. So that again comes back for me to the idea of totalizing knowledge versus this reverence for the finitude of knowledge, right? Like
the humility that's required.
The humility,
that,
yeah.
Right?
So it's like, again, I always call this totalitarianism because it's totalized knowledge. That's literally what it's based on. Ideas so good, we have to beat you over the head to accept them.
Trust us.
Yeah, trust me, bro. And then if you don't trust me. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have idea. What is the saying here? It's I'd rather have questions without answers than answers that cannot be questioned. It's that kind of dynamic. And actually, I forgot. There was something else I wanted to say, but I forgot. So
reciprocal opening is this first this openness, right? This open-mindedness. Bill W. was shut off from him saying it, and an opening was something like this. He was honest that he knew, like Socrates. He knew he didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't like, do I believe? It was, well, am I sure? It's like, it's not possible, and that's kind of opened him up. And he said, these are.
It's like humility is the ground of wisdom.
Right.
Yeah.
It is 100%. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then downstream from out of the organization Alcoholics Anonymous, that one of the steps, right, for this person deemed with this powerless feature that's beyond human aid, is self-inventory. And it's this honest inquiry to get down to causes and conditions, right? And you can find out, this is basically first principle thinking inverted onto you, yourself. This is, I feel this way. Here's the cause, you know? And then it's basically just a series of questions of why. It's like, why? And you end up at self-centeredness. The reason for any disturbance in my life, right? Fleshed out in this inventory sheet is synthesized by, you know, work of Dr. Carl Jung, the Oxford group. They say 100, but alcoholics are liars. I think it was, as far as I can tell, it was like 80 something alcoholics of personal experience synthesized this formulation of that's in the working text of Alcoholics Anonymous now, which is a personal inventory. And it's this, I just see it as this, that won't get someone sober or whatever, but if they're in the place, you know, there's something that predates them being even open to do this. It's the asking for help. It's the humility. It's after that though, there's more work to be done. And to get this vital spiritual experience that Dr. Carl Jung saying they need. And, but it's almost as if you are open to the idea that God couldn't do if he were sought, and to prioritize serving that above all else, you would do an honest inventory. It's almost just naturally would be downstream from it to get down into, what's blocking me off from the truth. Yeah. Why is my experience so divorced from everything is love? Yes. You know, it's, and you inquire, they talk about, and just real quick, the analogy they use is a business with unsaleable goods. You take inventory, we quarterly take inventory and we get rid of what's not serving us anymore. Wow. Right. And we take stock. And this is a process that predates the rest of the steps in the 12-step group. And it's just an interesting thing, you know?
Yeah. So you're kind of systematically attempting, I guess, to make the unconscious conscious, right? And then systematically decide what's serving you, what's not. Right. We keep hitting on this relationship between love and truth. And another definition of love I think is really interesting in this context. It's been said that love is the painful realization that something other than yourself is real. And as you kept describing, you could have kind of that tyrannical, totalitarian mindset where like, it's just me and all, the universe is either mine to exploit, or sometimes people are like, the whole universe is against me. Right. It's a whole nother version of that.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing, right? You
self-centered.
Yes. You basically have a 3-year-old mentality at that point. Right. Or this, the opposite of that, which is like a deep reverence and humility that knowledge is finite and it's useful, extremely useful, but ultimately we can never capture the totality of things between our ears. And the truth of that somehow leads to love, because love is that fundamental connectivity or relationality we're talking about,
And just real quick, I would like to.
This is hard in English too, because there's other, in like ancient Greek, they had multiple words for love, which so typically it's like agape.
I'm going to define love
people
for us, like not so like you can use it this way. When I'm saying it, at least in this context, I mean it as an experience, and this is not, again, not conceptual, not in the head. How I feel about and how I perceive life is, it's not against me. I see things for me. And there's other attributes like security. I feel secure. right? No matter conditionally what happens, all the money gets drained out of my account. I feel security still, right? And people, an analogy this, but this is the experience of love, right? There were people, a relationship with God, feeling the nearness of your creator is something like a literal experience. And it's not like a crazy mushroom experience. It still feels like regular life.
Yeah.
But how your disturbance isn't conditional on if you love me or not.
Yeah.
Right. It's not if you cut me off in traffic or if they rob my money, my security isn't depleted. Right. It's rooted in, and you say self-control and I think about like sovereignty.
Yeah.
Because the real insight is of yourself. It's like, that requires faith. It's like, why, if all the money in your bank account got drained, right? Why would you still feel secure, right? You have
Bitcoin,
faith.
baby.
Yeah, just like a Bitcoin somewhere else. And it's, and someone, $5 rent attacks you. Yeah. But it's really, the point I'm trying to make is how you feel if it is tethered to and purely conditional.
Yeah.
And and people can make this fact like morality only exists when the conditions are good enough. I think maybe it's just like that like pure morality or goodness is actually just very rare, maybe, but it's a real way or an acid test to see if your moral is your conditions, right? It's, well, when things aren't going good, do you still have that feature that you would that you describe as good or virtue?
Yeah,
it is the conditions can tell you about yourself, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, man, I'm very peaceful. It's like I wear loose garments and I talk softly and I rub crystals and I'm a chill guy. Yeah, and then my girl breaks up with me and I'm inflamed.
Right.
It's
this often actually is two things that they often say: the measure of a man is either what he does with power or how he responds to adversity. And those feel about right.
Right. So, and getting out of addiction really is, and we talked a little bit, it is the same as maturation. That's really what's hindered when you start drugs is you stop the process of the exposure, the mother that's caring for you too much. What's being stopped is the exposure and the interplay between reality and your chance to be honest and grow and open to it and grow with it.
Yeah.
Right. It's you stop that process.
Yeah.
So once the drugs and alcohol leave the people's systems, if they don't engage in the process of maturation, right, they return. It's something like that. And that's a proclamation. I said it that way, but I'm just saying what I think, derived from personal experience. That's what it feels like.
No, I love that. And it's like, we talked about this on the book club the other day too, that connection between maturation and time preference, I think is so fascinating.
Which perfectly maps over money as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I see it's another one of these as above, so below. It's like we're all dealing with our own time preferences across the span of our lives, right? It tends to lower as you age and have kids and, all these things. But then there's also the collective going through the same kind of maturation process.
Right.
Safety said that in his book repeatedly, right? That civilization is basically the physical manifestation of time preference going down. And there's something to that, man. It's so interesting that, like, I don't know, we came at it from a lot of different angles, but now this connection between freedom from addiction being a maturity curve, and maturity is connected to time preference is connected to incentives and individual maturation. I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the system predicated off a bunch of individuals follows the same rules.
Yes. Yes.
The same things that skew it are the same as in an individual, and in each individual, things that rectify it will probably be the same rules that rectify any system.
Yes.
So as above, so below.
So it's feedback loop driven, obviously. You can either be spiraling up or spiraling down. You're being generative or degenerative, something like that.
Right.
How would people think about changing the course if you're on a degenerative spiral and you wish to be on a generative spiral?
Yeah.
What is the trick to intervening in the feedback loop such that it reverses direction?
I'm best equipped because Because again, my experience, like I'll attempt to answer the question, but it's not for someone who's got like a little like a bad habit, right? I feel more comfortable speaking to like just the absolute worst case, like all the way full blown addiction, right? Can't see past yourself, self on top of self. You're your own God. You don't know it. You're beating yourself up. You think you're selfless, but you're actually so self-centered that you feel the world's against you, and or you just there's all sorts of ways this manifests, right? It's either bravado and your ego's super big and you can't tell me different,
stereotypical,
right? Or even it's like, man, I suck.
The universe is against me.
Do that. Yeah, and even if it's not against me, like that's one, and then it's like I'm. Like undeserving, like I'm not enough. It's not no one else's fault, not the universe's fault. It is mine. But it's still all about me.
Yeah,
it's and they're both equally as painful in different ways. But it's how to get out of. So, and another way to say it is like I'll speak to a person who's, the reciprocal narrowing. It's like, man, when it almost unifies, when you're like just a singularity, when the environment and the agent, it's stimuli and almost no conscious observer, just response, right? Because that's what it turns into. It's whatever's happening to me becomes almost, I'm not there anymore.
Reactive rather than proactive.
Right. Yeah. It's like and people, it's zombie-like, it's the consciousness or the thing that we really identify with being a human just isn't there anymore, and the participatory, reflective part of me, there's just no, anyway, that's extinguished to a large part. They're still in there. I know that because I was that, it was absolutely, like I said, my fingernails weren't grown, couldn't look people in the eyes, it was like, homeless, this, that, pathologically lying, like all it manifests in all sorts of ways, mostly in my mind though. And the big symptom and the most obvious is drug addiction, but it's perpetually in a cycle of doing the one thing I know I can't do today, and wanting to escape, but cannot. It's, and people call it hell on earth. And I understand that. And then I'm out of it now. My life's radically different. It's not just like a little better. It's better than the life I was living before, addiction. Yeah. It's like, and then it's like, well, how'd you do it or something? And I can see how it happened, but it's dangerous for me to say exactly what happened because it's not prescriptive. It won't be the exact same, but there's some axiomatic things about it. And it is, it's like to get honest, because you're so like messed up, you're not going to be like diving into Jungian psychology and like tethering out why you're angry and stuff. Yeah. That's not important. To be honest, that you can't fix it because you've been attempting to. You've made a decision one day, and here you find yourself doing the one thing against that decision, and that keeps happening. This is an indicator that you can't do it. Yeah. Right. So to ask for help, to be honest enough to ask for help, and then I'll relay. And again, it's not prescriptive. It's just. Some guy told me to pray, and it was the first time I prayed, and I'm not religious by any means or anything, but I was out of ideas finally. It's this humility that was forced on me. So it was the one time in my life when some guy, if you told me any other day, it's like, hey, maybe you should pray, I wouldn't have taken it. But again, I was out of ideas. It wasn't like oh man, that's a good idea. It was just like, all right, and I ended up doing that. So. And I sought help. And so that's what happened, I mean, a lot happened after that, and but I just think everything else is I think after that, everything happened for me perfectly. And it didn't seem that way, and it didn't feel that way, and it looked like regular life, but hindsight's 20/20 vision. Yeah. And since that moment of like surrendering, it's a trope, but the surrendering is the admission that I can't, it is the humility. It is the place God's a gentleman. He doesn't come in unless you're invited. That's another saying. And when I speak, like say the word God or invoke the word spirit and stuff, I don't even necessarily know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? But I'm speaking to something.
That's the point.
Right.
Yeah. that is the point, right? It's like the word for that which is beyond words.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
Like, wait, that's okay. Right. It can be just that.
Right.
And, or it can be more, like it's
right.
So that's amazing. That's such an amazing.
So like Ebby said to Bill, whatever it means to you, right? That's what I'm talking about.
Whatever
and it can mean whatever for you, but it's that.
Dude, that's beautiful. That is beautiful. I wanted to share these just because you brought up truth and we can bring it nearly to a close on this. We keep talking about truth and love, and then we define love a few different ways. So I wanted to share some of these definitions of truth that I found useful, just because as it works into the context here. But like the American pragmatist calling truth the end of inquiry, which I interpret sort of two different ways. There's like the end of inquiry is like you stop inquiring when you found the truth, right? It's like the end of the process of inquiry. Right. That's the point. That's why you're inquiring, right? You're on the search engine, you find the thing, all right, you're done. But there's also the sense of the word end as in an aim. So it's always the aim of inquiry is always aimed at truth. Right. That again, that's the point. That's its purpose. So truth is the end of, or found at the end of inquiry. I think the American pragmatist said, I thought that one was very useful. And then again, I think it's Heidegger that said, truth is like, what was the old word? Aletheia or aletheia, which translates to something like unconcealedness or disclosure. So radical openness, radical disclosure.
Let me interject one time.
Yeah, please. And then the third definition is just like an accurate portrayal of reality, which is a pretty standard definition. Right. So
I'd hate to say, the second one, well, the first one, I thought in that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that main literature, the 12-step programs like organized around, and maybe it's said outside of it, but God is found in the last analysis, and it's a proclamation in it, and I thought it's akin to truth, and it is that is true as far as I could tell. And then what was the second one?
So the first one's truth is found at the end of inquiry, and the second one is aletheia, which means unconcealedness, is like a direct kind of translation of it, but you could think of it as like radical disclosure or radical openness. There's an ongoing, he actually talks about how technology facilitates the ongoing disclosure of reality to us because we can do and see new things, have new experiences basically through technology than without it. So it's this ongoing disclosure of reality. And like the more we can conform to that, the more in touch with truth we are.
This is, and I know it's not necessarily disclosure, but it's that fourth process in the program Alcoholics Anonymous, I was talking about that, the objective, and it's very important, objective inventory. Yeah. So it's like, there's no self-pity. It doesn't matter why, right? It's through this, you really kind of find out the pain point in every point of your life, right? Whether it's on yourself or others, it is the prioritization of self-interest. And I don't mean in like the economics term, it's like this self-centeredness. Yeah. Right. That any time you're disturbed, it is the very root of the problem. And or another way to say it is like fear, but you could ask, why are you fearful? And it's because I have a vested interest in what I want. Right. So, but, a guy named Chuck Chamberlain, he wrote a book called The New Pair of Glasses. It's an amazing book. And it's really, and John Vervaeke maps over this perfect because in the reciprocal opening, what happens is your perspective changes, right? Yeah. Because your environment's growing, it's akin to wisdom too. Yeah. It's you're gaining more meta ability to see things, right? Yes. You're getting a more whole picture of things, right? And it's
the bigger the picture becomes, the smaller you become.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And this is a fix to, and you could think all the way down, like the opposite of that is me. Yes, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's addiction.
Yes.
But Chuck C. New Pair of Glasses, spirituality is not addition, it's subtraction. and I had no idea what that meant, you know, and, but more now I have some like lived experience of, oh man, 100% true. Like this isn't about like me floating 2 inches off the ground or like necessarily meditation or any particular practice, even though meditation's an amazing tool and all of that to define what spirituality is. Anal taining, but it's to define spirituality. Those are the practices, right? And that are useful and everything. But what it is peeling off and getting rid of illusions of self. And what you're left with is what has always been, which is love, which is oneness, which is, and that's very woo-woo. But
no, not at all. Actually,
process.
You're shedding that narrative layer, right? You're getting below the propositional layer of knowing into the body that is not story bound.
Right.
I mean, it is, of course, the story interacts, but you just come into the raw contact with the experience of being.
Right.
And that is like, it's interesting. Well, they say like before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water.
Bell curve.
The bell curve.
Yeah.
And so, it's, man, and I mean, for me at least, it's like you sort of think you're making progress sometimes, but then you get so flipped upside down and humbled again. And it's just like, I don't know. You just smile and keep going. Yeah. But life does genuinely get better, I think, like as you try to tap into radical truth. Like, not that I haven't been to the point of addiction that you have been, but I've been out of radical truth and I've experienced negative things in my life. And now to like try to be living in it as well as I can, like I've definitely seen the benefits. Yeah. And it's always a struggle though. Like, that thing I said earlier about the truth being hard up front. And like, there's so many times I have to like, fuck, I don't want to have this conversation, but you go do it.
Right. And I will say that even like that's the questions of what is matter and what matters. These, I see these, these are different now. Right. And I'm not even a person saying addiction is bad. I'm not saying this is bad, that lying is bad. There is no good and bad. It is, and like we said, to the process of it is really where it's at. That's almost the whole point, I think, of life itself. It's to discover itself through processes. Yes. It's not ever to get somewhere in particular. It's constantly circling to the infinite. Right. And infinite means forever out there.
The universe engaged in self-reflection. Kind of thing.
And it's, so that's the and you can, so if you relieve yourself of the burden of, well, I should be better, or I should be better, and also engage in the process of trying to be better. And hold both those truths.
Dynamic tension.
Right. And a symmetrical duality of these things. And at the center of those is like the ideal, like being, you know, and I think of Alan Watts, and it's to live life sincerely, but not take it too seriously. It is the coupling of those two features. Understand that you should be playing this game, and you should be trying to be better and all that, but just know that's a story. And you're actually, that's rested in the context of everything's already perfect. Everything is as it should be and couldn't be any different than as it is. So, and that's very meta, but I think
it's beautiful though. It's beautiful. The dynamic tension and letting go of the narrative architecture, although it serves you, like don't over identify with it.
Right.
And be identified with the ontological reality of just everything's purely relational and very beautiful. You know, there's so much there. But somehow, you got to hold those things in tension with one another. The word Vervaeke uses, tonos, right? It's the dynamic tension between opposites. Not that those are opposites necessarily, but I guess they are in some ways.
They're other sides of the coin. They're other sides of the same coin.
Yeah. No, that's very beautiful. And that's great. So that is then the pathway. It sounds like it's like a lot more than just addiction treatment.
Oh, definitely.
Right? It's like, even if you were just, because again, I don't know, like not sure about which career path to go down, you know, you could do all this stuff and you'd still get mega benefits. Right. You know, you don't even need to be fully gone on some addiction situation.
Of course.
You can kind of be lost in any sense of the word of being human.
Right.
And this is going to give you some value.
Right.
I know what it sounds like. Like I don't,
it is, I've never done it. I mean, I would just, people implicitly participate in the same process that gets that same revelatory, truth telling, rectifying things. People do that, you know, if you're lucky, naturally. Like that's you're called to do that. That's the calling and consciousness dynamic. That's what's happening inside of everyone.
Yes.
It's the not heading towards the calling, right? Continuously. This is what leads
not heeding the call.
All sorts of symptoms, right?
Yeah.
One of the symptoms is physical chemical addiction, but it's one of many symptoms. And so I'm just, and to reverberate this idea that, like, at least in that powerless variety, Dr. Carl Jung was, alcohol is not that person's problem. If it was, they're not an alcoholic. Alcohol is the solution to their problem, right? Their problem is living life on life's terms, being themselves. Do you know?
Wow, what a nice reframe.
So knowing that alcohol is not their problem, it's like, oh, they're no different than other people. They're just further down the scale of they're further separated from themselves or the truth,
right?
You know. So and again, it expresses itself in all sorts of ways. So whatever pathway. That's why I said it's fruitful to think about what rectifies addiction, because it's applicable to all ailments, psychological or spiritual ailments.
Anytime almost you're not missing when you're missing an aim, almost, it seems like it'd be very useful. Like I'm just thinking about like could be an Easter egg hunt or something, right? And you're just kind of like lost and you can't find the eggs. Like you should stop, take inventory. Like, what do you know? Like go through. It just seems like a good practice to like operate effectively as a human being that can be applied to multiple domains. So it's just further interesting that it's so effective in the domain of addiction, which is like a very pernicious problem. So it seems like, you know, like a kind of a generalized tool, but also very specialized in a way. Yeah. And again, I'm saying all that I don't really know, but from what you're describing is just intuitively what it sounds like it would be.
I'll say one thing about it, that it's normally, say like it's a radical, it really is radical truth, like the objective inventory part. And there's other things that far down from those steps in that process in Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's the self-authoring thing too with Peterson, right? It's not the same program, but it's the same theme.
It's along those lines. He's really, I mean, Jordan Peterson is privy to that program, and it's and maps on a lot of this is, and again, this is ancient knowledge almost, right? Just articulated and condensed and revealed in a way that's applicable. Right. It's very simple actually. Yeah. Right. But I'm just saying, my point is that if you would honestly do it, because the requirements are honesty and thoroughness. Yeah. And anything short of, there is no middle of the road for it. It's, what I was going to say is the addict does it out of necessity, right? To really do it, to go all the way down, to turn that sign on your forehead, like Jeff Poop said, and really look at it, right? And not just think about it in a general way, to go all the way down and inquire and take that honest inventory of yourself. You could imagine how difficult it is. It's the ego's job to do the opposite, right? And as you're doing it, spin all the stories and whatever, justify this. Yeah. And it's to be able to do it, it seems like, or I'll at least say this, the people who would do it, it's on the other side of necessity a lot. Do you know, it's not like, oh, well, I got a problem with like coffee, and it's like, let me do this radical inquiry into myself and restructure my identity. That's right. You know, it's like, so it's a useful tool, definitely, but
people are driven to it out of necessity.
Right. And the people that would do it to this effective way, because again, at the end of this process, not just that inventory, that's the very beginning, right? Is they're talking about whatever a spiritual experience is, a radical change in perspective, right? And an emotional rearrangement, right? And I'm almost it's a rebornness of a person. You're that person will drink again. This person needs to die and become another person. It's a transformation, right? On the other side of this process. So it's, so whatever.
It's a resurrection thing, right? Yeah. And it really is.
Yeah. It's useful, but to the degree that you would do it would probably be to the extent that you need to do it. Something like that.
Yeah, the continual death and rebirth pattern, like, you know, it is, once again, if everything's in flux and constantly becoming, like every lesson you learn, you have to go through a micro death to become the guy that knows the thing he now knows, right? The ignorant view died, and then now, And so, yeah, I don't know. It's very, no man steps into the same river twice, that whole thing. But I guess one final question, or feel free to take it whichever way you want. Like, I don't know if we've left anything out, but one last question I had is, how do men heed the call? Is that purely a process of self-discovery? Are there like things we can say that help them find their call?
I will say one thing, that it takes a little bit of initial inertia or effort on your part. It can't be done for you. But if you put yourself in a position to seek fellowship, I think it does help, which is weird, especially if you're a man, uncomfortable. Don't think it's going to do much for you. Especially
if you're introverted.
Right. Especially if you're introverted. But it'll be, to the extent that it's hard for you, it'll be even better, but there's a lot of like what I've been speaking to is the like full responsibility, 100% you, no one can do that for you. This is this weird interplay where like, if you just show up, put yourself in the right position and seek a little bit through, and stop judging other people so much. It's usually, even when you're beat, it's weird how much we can do that. It's like, oh, what can you do for me? It's like, oh, well, look at the car he's driving or whatever. He's not like me, I can't relate to him. All these are all just thoughts and opinions.
Yeah. Stories.
More stories. To put yourself in a position to be, and to seek fellowship through other men, I think it's a lost, I would say tradition, but it was a tradition formulated out of what already worked, right? But to seek a fellowship, in whatever way, and internet's really bad for you in a lot of ways. Maybe you could use it to your advantage, and you could scour the internet for a group or something like that. But if you have but as far as addiction goes, definitely there's explicitly like places and people you can reach out to that are just like you that aren't anymore. Those are the best people to get advice from, probably, or like a relationship. I don't ask the guy who's divorced 5 times for relationship advice. I go to a guy who's happily married for 40 years. And same with addiction. That's, and I'm not downplaying the medical fraternity. They save lives and stuff. I'm just saying there's something very grassroots and real and redemptive between people who know the particular things you're going through, and to disclose to them, back to the reciprocal opening, and they'll do it to you, and to show, and to just the best of you come out, or try to muster as much of that, and in hopes that the best of other people come out of them and reach back out to you. And so fellowship is this little hack, I would say. Just put yourself in the position. Maybe something will happen for you, but because otherwise, you got to do it all by yourself. And I'm a guy who couldn't. So, if you're better than me, hats off to you. But
and we're just not evolved to do things by ourselves. I mean, of course we can do some things by ourselves, but like we're very interdependent.
I agree. Biologically, psychologically, we were made with each other.
Yeah.
Right. There's no pulling this thing apart.
Yeah. So dude, it's so fascinating. I love hearing you talk about this stuff. And then I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a new perspective on this whole thing about reciprocal opening, which we often describe as love, but now connecting that to aletheia as, unconcealedness. And there's something there, right? Like it's when you align with the becoming itself, with the unfolding flux of reality in a very honest way.
Right.
You just,
as honest as you can be.
As honest as you can be. Yeah. The stories are never actually fully honest, but you're trying your best to keep them honest, and you're aware that they're not ever the thing, right? Don't mistake the map and the and it's all these things that are subtly intertwined into love and truth, and somehow those two things touch.
Very hippie-ish of you, Robert.
Yes, I know.
100. I agree. And I would the ramifications of engaging in that process, right? Or just trying, like trudging that.
Yeah,
and trudging being walking with purpose. It doesn't mean like crawling or crawling. If you do that, there's little indicators that you're on the right path, and one of them is enthusiasm. That you get a kind of people describe it as a new lease on life, or you see things through a different lens. And enthusiasm, I didn't know. Theos is enthusiasm, and it means filled with God or filled with the Spirit. God within, and you're gaining back that spirit that you were pseudo trying to get through other means. Yeah. Right. They're the like a false idol or something that you were trying to fill something with, and you get that same thing by how you're living, right? Yes. Just by the process of taking a different mode of being and approaching life differently, like telling the truth, or like shaking hands with a person, trying to gain fellowship, whatever it is. Just attempting to do that connects you with that thing you were missing. Yeah, right? You don't have to get all the way somewhere, some destination. Right. Just starting to engage in that process, you start to get it. Right.
Beautiful. So yeah, can be a long journey, but starts with a single step. Yeah. Dude, Stephen, thank you for having this conversation. I hope this is important for people too, because like I know there's a lot of people struggling out there with a lot of different things, and so again, this sounds like a general framework for addressing your life, but also very specific for addiction. So I don't know. It seems like really important tool on the surface. So thank you for sharing all this.
Yeah, of course.
Where can people find you on the internet? Nowhere, apparently.
They can't. Yeah,
because you were a ghost when we tried.
But I have a handle Twitter. I have. Maybe I'll give you the link to it. I'm not the Twitter. I'll give you that, but I'm just never on there. I'll say just like very radical Bitcoin stuff on it once a month. But I got like an AI like project going on, whatever. But I honestly don't even want to like really drop anything, you know. Or it's an honor to be here. I really love what you're doing, and I admire your attitude that you approach it with.
Thank you.
I love who you are, and yeah, dude, I'm just honored to be here. It really is.
As am I. Yeah. And I'm honored to know you as well. And you're also a badass painter. I should tell people. You paint the meanest white dragon I've ever seen. And my daughter really appreciates it. Yeah. Dude, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.